launch us in.
And are we letting the other people in the waiting room in?
I believe, oh, yeah, we just had a few more people join. Yep, we can go ahead and knit all now.
All right, it is 6:30, so good
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. I'm Christina Paul, and we are just having a few last GPAC members filter in. We've got enough folks to get started, and I am going to turn it over to, looking at all of my notes, apologies. I'm going to turn it over to Martine, who is going to give us an update on how to access the Spanish language channel for this meeting.
Oh, sorry, Christina, I think Martine accidentally just fell out of the meeting, so we're going to give him 1 second to get loaded back up. Eric, if you want to give him co-host access so he can unmute himself. I just saw him pop into the waiting room. Martine, please let us know when you're on or able to read this slide.
I'm looking for him in the participants here. Bear with me.
Here, he's coming in again.
There he is.
Thanks all for your patience. Martine, please let us know when you are online here and ready to read this slide. Do we have Martine? Great. You should be able to unmute yourself, Martine, if you want to read this. Thank you.
Okay. So sorry about that.
No problem.
I may have hit the wrong button at some point twice, which is bad. Sorry. Mi nombre es Martín Rivarola, junto con mi compañero Gustavo. Vamos a estar haciendo la traducción simultánea para la reunión de GPAC del día de hoy. Para usted escuchar la reunión en el canal de audio en español, todo lo que necesita hacer es apretar en el símbolo donde dice Interpretation, que es el que tiene el globo terráqueo, y ahí le va a dar la opción de seleccionar el idioma español. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Paul. Dave, I'm sorry.
Great, and Eric, we'll give you a sec here just to make sure you get Martine into that channel and we start that recording. Looks like we're all set. Back to you. Great.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I am going to do a brief roll call before we get into our presentation for this evening. All right. Please unmute yourself and let us know that you're here when I call your name. Dave Alden.
Here.
Panama Bartholomew. I see you. Stephanie Blake.
Here.
Phil Boyle.
Here.
Erin Chmielewski, let us know that she's not going to be able to join. Delia Diaz, I haven't seen her yet, but she may join. Mary Dooley, similarly. Sierra Downey.
Present.
Jesse Feller. I saw Jesse. Hi, Jesse. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Okay, thanks. All right, and Panama's not either. Okay, we'll make sure that you guys are co-hosts. Thank you so much. Allie Gaylord.
Here.
Thank you. Inchi Jacobo.
Here.
Roger Leventhal.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ileana Madrigal is not able to join us. Similarly, Roberto Mares is not able to join. Chris Rebelo.
Here.
Bill Reinhardt. I think he's on vacation. John Shribs. Josh Simmons. I saw your face. Let us know if you can unmute yourself. Maybe not. Okay, Eric will double check everybody. Janice Cater Thompson.
Here.
And Bill Wolpert.
I'm here.
Great. All right, thanks so much. Back to you, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. And thank you all again for joining us tonight. Much appreciated. As usual, just a quick overview of logistics. You all are experts, I'm sure, again, at this point, but we do have closed caption available. Obviously, you can either use your phone and or your device to listen along. We do ask you to unmute yourself until it's your turn or to speak, and we'll kind of talk through that again, but we're just going to use a simple hand raise when we have the Q&A, both during the general discussion and when we get to the small groups. And just a reminder for members of the public, you will be muted throughout the duration of the meeting until we get to the public comment sections, and then Eric will unmute you if you all raise your hands then to speak as well. We'd love to see your faces. So if members of the GPAC, if you can keep your videos on, we'd greatly appreciate it. It would be great to see you all throughout the duration. And as I mentioned earlier, just to access the hand raise is through your reactions at the bottom of your screen. You'll see an option for the raise hand. And we'll use that both for the facilitation of the GPAC discussion, again, as well as the public comment section.
And I'm sorry to stop you there for just a sec, but I'm going to suggest that members of the GPAC, if you don't see the option to unmute yourself, can you raise your hand? Can you raise, okay, Jesse Feller Han can't, or even your virtual hand, so that I think Eric Roberts will be able to see that.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. I do see, Eric, I do see Panama and Jessica still didn't have the co-host option. So you also will see a co-host option pop up, and then you'll have access to unmute yourselves. Thanks for that catch, Christina. Okay. And honestly, if you just even physically raise your hands, we'll probably be able to see you as well. For some reason, there's an issue. So we'll catch you one way or another. As usual, if we have any technical issues or glitches, you could feel free to reach out to Eric Roberts at eroberts@cityofpetaluma.org. Or for those that are joining us through the Spanish channel, it's Martin at mrttranslation.org. So we have a great agenda for you all tonight, packed with a lot of good information. As we did last time, we're going to start with public comments on any comments that folks might have in general about the process. We're going to give you some project updates since the last time we spoke, let you know what the project team's been up to. More specifically, we're going to dive into guiding principles and areas of change and stability based on the homework that you all received. I hope you had a chance to review it. We're going to now ask for your input after we give a brief presentation. We're going to move into small groups like we did last time and have more in-depth discussions with you all. You'll see some resources pop up, the same kind of spreadsheet that you used in your homework, as well as we'll go to the Miro board again as a virtual board to share information. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to break those groups up, and then members of the public will be along with us for that ride as well. And then we'll come back together, do a report out, and have time for a discussion. We do want to also talk about next steps. We're really excited to be rolling out a bunch of fun engagement activities throughout the community that we wanted to keep you all up to speed on and ask for your input and hopefully support as we move forward. And then we will have public comment again at the end like we did last time, and then wrap up the meeting with some final thoughts from you all if you had any. And our goal is to end right at 9 o'clock as usual. So with that, for members of the public, if you did have any comments for the group that you wanted to present now, recognizing we want to respect your time as well and not force you to stay to the end of the meeting. If you had any comments to share now, if you can please use the hand raise function like we mentioned earlier. It's in the on the toolbar underneath either the reactions tab. It might also be, depending on your version of Zoom, within your participant window. So if you could let us know. It looks like we have one hand up. There's a couple hands, great. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric to unmute you, and then you'll see a time clock on the screen as well. Much like a planning commission or city council meeting, we are going to have a 2-minute limit for comments, and then we'll get back to the planned agenda. So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dave. 2 hands are raised. I see M. Sullivan, followed by Joy Robinson. M. Sullivan, I've asked you to unmute. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'd like to make an impassioned plea that the city reconsider allowing Amy's to develop on the banks of the McNear Channel and to reconsider development at the Lynn Marine site on D Street. The McNear Channel, which is not dredged, will very shortly here become a vital wetland marsh with sea level rise. Per the San Francisco Estuary Institute, 98% of Petaluma's wetlands are now gone. So this is critical habitat for our native wildlife, and we need to pull far back off of it. We've seen what just happened in Florida with saltwater intrusion and the collapse of housing. The Lind Marine property just below the bridge sits on dredged fill. This deep water containment area is seeing seals and otters return to the river. We must allow them habitat to haul out, and we must pull back off the banks of our river so that when we do flood, our river can go overbank and we won't lose infrastructure. The public paid out $23 million in infrastructure losses previously in the Payran area. And per scripts in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Sonoma County is #1 out of 414 Western counties and 11 states in flood losses to the tune of $5 billion because we build our infrastructure in vulnerable locations. So we get a 2-for-1 here, folks. By pulling back off the riverbanks, we preserve what precious little natural wetland we have left. We have very little deep water, and so this is really important. And we desperately need not to build in vulnerable locations regards our infrastructure. So please consider that tonight as you go forward, focused on where we should be building and where we should not be building. Thank you kindly.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Joy Robinson. Joy, I've asked you to unmute yourself, and you'll need to do the same on your end.
Hello, my name is Joy Robinson, and I would like to address with you this evening the importance of including an urban forest management plan in the guiding principles of Petaluma's general plan. I live in Midtown Petaluma, and in my neighborhood, we are reminded daily of the importance of trees in our everyday life. We have all too few trees in our neighborhood, and during the summer months, the sidewalks and the streets become unbearably hot. In this neighborhood, the kids play in the front yards after school. And in fact, there's only one shade tree in our neighborhood. And we don't have any parks within safe walking distance where they can go. Every day I'm reminded how we have fallen short on our duty to give these kids an acceptable place to grow up. But trees provide much more than that. They provide a source of respite to all of us. And the social and psychological value of trees are well documented. Not to mention their critical importance for the local ecosystem. Petaluma is in dire need of more trees. We have lost a huge proportion of our tree canopy over the years, and we continue to lose more and more at an alarming rate. The restoration and expansion of that tree canopy is absolutely critical if we hope to make any headway at all on the problems of climate change, which are now upon us. Petaluma's leaders are priding themselves on their efforts to be a role model for cities in the fight against climate change. We read today in the Argus Courier that the City Council has been active on this front, and we have a Climate Action Commission hard at work. Apparently, in Petaluma, we have an ambitious climate emergency framework. So I'm wondering why there's even any discussion of whether to include an urban forest management plan in our general plan. We should have already done this. We should have the strongest tree protection ordinance in California.
Joy, I apologize. We are at the 2-minute mark for your comment. I have muted you. Thank you for your comment. Up next, we have, oh, I apologize. We had a hand raised and then it went away. I'll provide another moment in case that participant would like to raise their hand again. And I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, I'll pass it back to Dave.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. And thank you members of the public, for sharing your thoughts. Great to see you here. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch into the presentation and give you an update on where we've been before we give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about here tonight. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thanks for those comments, members of the public. Thanks also Christina and Martine for opening us tonight. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Matt sends his regards. His family is hitting a big milestone this week because he's taking his son to college, so he's unable to join us this evening. We're going to focus, as Dave said tonight, most of our time on review of the guiding principles and identification of areas of stability and change. But we first wanted to bring you up to speed and set some context for tonight's meeting within the planning process, and let you know how things are going across multiple tracks of project activity. First, I'd like to step back just a bit so that you understand where we're headed and how your past work, tonight's work, and future work contributes to getting there. The outline on this slide will be covered in more detail during the upcoming Planning 101 session. But at a high level, we thought it would be helpful to very concisely summarize for you what the final general plan product will look like, what its basic components will be. Because this really, from a project perspective, is the North Star. Each step of the planning process is building toward one or more of these components of the updated general plan. And specifically, those components are to frame the entire plan and to making sure everything else is consistent with it. We start with a vision and guiding principles. Core to the general plan is the land use map, which really sets the land use and development patterns and density for the city. And then the substantive heart of the plan is a series of topic-specific elements, each with topic-specific goals, policies, and programs. And we've touched on those over the course of meetings so far, everything from transportation to land use to environmental justice and many other topics. And then at the end of a plan usually is an implementation section where it outlines specific near, medium, and long-term steps for implementing the general plan. And your plan will also include metrics and targets to help the city over time monitor how successfully it's As we've mentioned before, general plan updates are generally incremental in their approach. Each step informs the next, and each step is generally associated with a phase of the project. Next slide, please. Again, this is high level and overly simplified, but the intent is to further reinforce the connection between the previous two slides, the planning process and the final product that we're working towards. We share this in part so that we can see when we will be diving into different issues that may be part of a particular, maybe of a particular interest to you or others. It's very normal in a planning process to want to get to certain topics right away, or to dive right into the substance of a general planning effort, like mapping land use changes. But we often have to ask people for patience because we typically don't get into the substance of a plan until the middle of the planning process. Likewise, during early stages, when we're focusing on discovery and visioning, it's tempting to jump from what is, that is a clear understanding of current baseline conditions, to what should be. But the what should be comes later as well. So far, we've been focusing on the discovery and visioning phases, and tonight we'll begin for the first time to dip our toes into land use alternatives. Unfortunately, nothing in planning is ever simple. Shared this slide before. Just want to note that though we generally follow an incremental step-by-step process, some planning phases overlap. And this is particularly the case in this planning process where we're driven early on by a statutory deadline associated with the housing. So again, we're concurrently and through the fall wrapping up baseline conditions. By the end of the fall, we also hope to have a vision and set of guiding principles completed and adopted by council. In the meantime, we are starting on alternatives to make sure we're doing the groundwork necessary, and because it can be a rather lengthy process. And again, it's driven because by spring of next year, we hope to have all that completed to inform the final site selection for Again, you've seen a version of this in the past. This is kind of a generic summary of the iterative process we go through with the GPAC during each of these phases of the planning process. In general terms, we start often with the GPAC, getting initial thoughts, which really help us inform our subsequent engagement with the public, as well as ways in which to focus our analysis as a team. Again, so we start with the GPAC, get some initial thoughts like we're doing tonight around areas of change. We then expand the outreach to the general public to inform our analysis with local knowledge. We take all that in addition to our data-driven and research-driven analysis to come up with interim work product, and then again, bring it back to you, the GPAC, for review and recommendation before it goes to City Council for a final decision. And just so you have an idea where we're headed in the near term, generally, we're jumping a bit all over the place, as I mentioned, because we have to be moving on multiple fronts concurrently. But there is a purpose behind each of these various initiatives. So tonight we're talking about areas of change and guiding principles. Next month, we'll be coming to you with more specific land use and design questions in the context of some of what we've been finding from existing conditions work. And then in subsequent months, we'll move through actual review and finalization of the vision and guiding principles before it goes on to council, while at the same time continue to ask for your guidance and support as we flesh out the alternative. In the meantime, we'll be working closely with the public through a round of public engagement activities, which we'll explain in more detail later. Dave, did we want to pause there to see if there are any just quick clarifying questions?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Ron. GPAC members, any thoughts, questions, or comments at this point from what you heard of kind of where we've been and where we're heading before we dive into the meat of the presentation? You could use the raise hand if you had any questions or comments. All right, Ron, it looks like you nailed it. So right back to you to get in the presentation.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm just going to share a little bit of context and background on these two topics that we're focusing on tonight. And then Dave will explain how we'll be inviting you to dive into them tonight during small group breakout sessions. So the first of the two is guiding principles. Last time we introduced the idea of vision, and the two kind of go hand in hand. The vision establishes a clear description of the city's and the community's preferred future, what it is we're aiming for 20, 30 years out. The guiding principles, in turn, provide clear direction, principles to follow to achieve that vision. They often focus on different values, different priorities, but fundamentally should identify the key themes and thrust of the general plan as a whole, many of which often end up being addressed in a variety of different elements. Nice thing is you already have guiding principles in your current general plan, so we're not starting from scratch. And so that's why we asked you as homework, and that we'll discuss tonight, to comment on those and let us know what you think of the current ones, what other new ones should be added, and that would be incredibly valuable information for us as we can consider that, plus additional public input and other insights from our baseline. Like the vision the guiding principles follow a similar path to finalization. The city did some great outreach work as early as 2020, much of which helped identify priorities and types of improvements. You gave us additional insights along with council members during the listening sessions and at previous GPAC meetings. We're then going to also, during the upcoming area meetings and pop-ups, also ask people about using maps as a point of reference about where specifically in the city they would like to see different types of change, as well as areas where they really want to keep things the way they are. They want to keep them preserved. We'll then do some work as a team and come back in preparation for the workshops where we'll have a higher level, more focused discussion, considering some of the themes that have emerged from all that previous engagement work, all with the goal in mind of then coming back to the GPAC with a draft set of vision and guiding principles for your final review and recommendation before it goes to. Important when considering the current guiding principles are many of the topics and issues that you've raised and we've discussed at previous meetings and or in the listening sessions, in addition to all the other initiatives the city has undertaken in the recent past or since the last general plan was adopted, and even very recently. Here's a handful of examples. Again, Dave, I think I'll pause there before jumping into areas of change. See if there's any questions.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ron. And one note for Eric, I believe Delia Diaz has joined us and she might need some co-host access if you want to grab that real quick. Yeah, thank you, Ron. Same thing, members of GPAC, if you had any thoughts, you'll have plenty of opportunity to share your input, as Ron mentioned, as we get into the small group discussions. But any general thoughts or questions at this point from what you just saw presented? All right, 2 for 2, Ron, doing well.
All right.
Back to you.
All right. There'll be opportunity during the small groups to answer any questions as well. But so finally, areas of change and stability. So again, this is a pretty simple concept, and on this slide is an example of a kind of high-level identification of those types of areas for a different city. But we'd like tonight to be getting your guidance to inform development of alternatives. And the alternatives to the general plan really are a combination, really a focus on land use change, different densities and uses in different parts of the city, then supplemented with supporting infrastructure and other services. But one of the first steps that we take when beginning to identify what might be the alternative that might inform the preferred final land use map is to narrow down our focus by identifying areas that are primed for land use changes, as well as areas that need to be preserved. And we've heard a lot about both from both you and members of the public that have commented at these previous meetings, and I'm sure we're going to hear lots of other great ideas during. But again, we'd like to start tonight getting some of your initial thoughts to supplement what we've already heard. Like the vision and guiding principles, there's a process we're following to get to final product. The end point for alternatives is later. Like I said earlier, it's going to be later this spring, but it is a lengthy process, and so that's why we want to begin getting into the conversation. Again, we're using blue and orange here to distinguish public roles from planning team roles. And note again that at the beginning, we're getting lots of input from you and the public, while at the same time, we're getting some of our own analysis. And we'll integrate those findings into a vision diagram, which we'll use to inform what we do at the workshop and with a survey focused on alternatives before we do some additional analysis and bring it back to you. Bring a set of alternatives to you before, excuse me. So we, in the workshops and surveys focused on alternatives, we get to a preferred alternative. We then complete our analysis, and that preferred alternative is what comes to you before final recommendation and decision. Again, any questions before you break us into small groups, Dave?
Members of GPAC? Nope, I see a lot of nodding or shaking heads, meaning no, I don't see any questions popping up. Okay, now we get to the fun part. The most important part of tonight's meeting is to hear from you all. So as we mentioned earlier, there's kind of 2 parts to this that we want to discuss with you here tonight. The first will be about the guiding principles, which again is feeding off of the homework that you received, and we'll break up into small groups. You'll see a worksheet pop up very similarly to what you saw as part of your homework, and we just want to get thoughts from you all on each one of those principles. We don't necessarily need to get into wordsmithing, but really just kind of general thoughts about each one of those principles, and then we definitely would love to see any additional thoughts you might have if it is on wordsmithing. If you want to email those to us, we'd love to incorporate that information as well into the summary moving forward. So that'll be the first half of the meeting or of the small group discussion, and you'll be getting notifications from Eric letting us know when we're getting close to time. And then we're going to transition to discussing the areas of change and stability for the second half hour of the full hour that we're going to have with you all. And we'll bring up again the Miro board, that virtual board, where we'll be taking input from you all directly on a map of the city. So we have location specific input from you all that we'll then take back and summarize as well. And as we did last time, we're going to keep the main room for Spanish interpretation. So Martin will stay here with folks, and he's letting folks know that now that they'll stay in this room if they would like to. And I'll ask for those that would like to, through Martin, if they could use the hand raise, just so we make sure that we do leave you in this room. Worst case, if you're moved to another room, you could easily just come back to the main room where the Spanish interpretation will be going on. And then the rest of you will just get members of the GPAC we randomly selected. You'll randomly get put into a room. You'll see something pop up on your screen. You'll move into one of 3 rooms. And members of the public, same thing will happen. You'll just randomly be distributed within the 3 rooms. At the end of that 60 minutes, we're going to come back like we did last time. We're going to have a quick report out. We might even pick members of the GPAC to help us with that report out, and or the facilitators can do that report out. Just so we kind of get a high level understanding of what the conversation was. And then we could leave time as well for a discussion as a group before we wrap it up with some of the next steps that we talked about earlier. So as I mentioned earlier, this worksheet will pop up as an example that you've seen as a resource. And then we'll have this, the virtual board, virtual whiteboard, where we're going to be taking down your input with sticky notes to make it as interactive and fun as possible. And you'll have note takers and facilitators in each room to help you with that process. So unless there's any questions, I'm going to ask Eric, assuming you have the room set up, to go ahead and launch us into the small groups. And I don't see any hands raised, Eric, so we'll just assume that you could distribute the members of the public evenly as well, and folks that want to come back to this main room can for the interpretation in Spanish.
Yes, and just a quick note as well. Because everyone has co-host, or at least GPAC members have co-host access, just make sure that we don't accidentally stop the breakout rooms. That will send us all back here.
That's right. I think we're giving you ultimate control here as co-host. So yeah, I think that might have happened accidentally last time. And the reason we give you co-host, just to make it simple, so you can unmute yourselves after you use the simple hand raise or physically raise your hands. And the members of the public, as a reminder, your mics will be muted by the facilitators so that we can keep this as a GPAC discussion, but we'll have time at the end of the meeting again for members of the public to contribute. So you'll be in these groups mainly just to observe. Good reminder, Eric, thanks. So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to let Eric press the magic button and get us going in the small groups. Have fun. We'll see you all in a bit. And Eric, I don't know if you noticed, but it looks like there might have been one additional member of the GPAC that did join us. It looks like you might have already gotten it. Or no, I think it was Josh. Josh could stay here with us.
Yeah, I was watching them as they came in. I believe I left them in the main session.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And I'm going to ask Michelle, part of the Ramey Associates team that's going to be here helping with the note taking, to share her screen. And we're going to launch right into the guiding principles and get started.
Give me 1 second, Dave. I'm still trying to find the worksheet. Oh, there it is. Never mind.
You got it. Okay, great.
Share it momentarily.
No problem. So folks, members of the GPAC, so just as a reminder, I'm hoping you all had a chance to review the worksheet that we sent you. I'm gonna go down one by one in each of the guiding principles and just ask for your feedback, what you like about it, what you might not like about it, what you think could use some refinement. Michelle, I think you might be on the wrong screen potentially. There we go. You might need to zoom in. You know what? If you're on the sheet, I see you on there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay, that works. That works for me.
We'll make it simple. No problem. Let's see if I can get this out of the way. Okay. Can you all see that okay? I could zoom in a couple notches here too. So you guys see okay? Okay, excellent. So let's start right in with this first guiding principles. And I forgot to mention, we also have Heather Hines in the room with us as well as a city resource. Thank you, Heather, for being here to help answer any questions. So we're going to go ahead and launch in the first guiding principles. I might, if you'd like me to read the whole thing, I can. I might just read the titles and ask you to give your input. The first one is maintain a close-knit, neighborly, and family-friendly city. And that's really around activities and facilities that are used most often, such as stores and parks that are accessible to residents. So really, a balanced approach of mix of uses in parks and community centers to make sure that we have this cohesive whole. Jesse, I see your hand raised. You're up.
Yeah, I think we could just add family and age-friendly city. I know there's a lot of discussion around making cities more accessible for the under 5 and the over 65 population. So finding ways to just focus on different abilities, disabilities, small children, aging in place, etc. So family and age-friendly cities.
Great point. Thank you, Jesse. Panama, you're next.
Thank you. And so a few thoughts. And one of them is kind of overarching. First of all, great vision in the last general plan, great guiding principles, I got to say. A good job in whoever that team was. But I think one of my overarching comments about a bunch of this is it uses pretty passive language. I don't know if it's just like the sign of the times or if we're just far more urgent nowadays. We're polarized and extreme. But I find myself more towards, instead of, maintaining a close-knit, like how do we actually promote or bring about, or just I'm looking for more active tense language about really making this like this is who we are and therefore we are going to bring this into being rather than maintaining or we're preserving or we're enhancing. It's like, no, we're going to create. So I love some more active tense, aggressive, good quality planning language. And then I think one of the biggest issues is really our mixes of uses, particularly on the east side, and really building community-centeredness on the east side and really giving a mix of uses in neighborhoods, in and around neighborhoods that allow for the type of walkable, family-friendly neighborhoods that we want. And so it says it in there that it wanted to do it, but it feels like it's even more imperative now with everything that we're trying to deal with around climate change and walkability, et cetera, to double down on the mix of uses and creating in and around each neighborhood a set of services.
Excellent points. Thank you, Panama. Yeah, and I saw a couple thumbs up from Jesse and Phil on your previous point as well. So great thoughts. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts on this first principle before we move on? Yes, Yancy.
I think this will tie in with something later on with housing. And I appreciated what Jesse said about the age friendly, but also friendly to people who are like out of high school and stuff. Like I've heard there's been a lot of leaving the area because they can't afford to live here. And we know that there's a lot of jobs in here that we want to fill, but people can't afford to stay here, especially straight out of high school, straight out of college, and that kind of stuff.
Great point. Great point. So something that's also a little more affordable for folks to be able to stay around. That's a great point. Excellent. Okay, Delia, I think you might be the only member of GPAC that hasn't had a chance to contribute on this one. Any thoughts before we move to the next?
No, I think the points have been covered, so nothing to add.
Thank you. And Josh, I'm not sure if you're with us, but you're welcome to chime in as well. I see you here. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next. The next one is preserve and enhance Petaluma's historic character. Again, I'm happy to read this if you'd like, but this really kind of tries to build off of the rich history after the 1906 earthquake, the evolution of Petaluma River being a big part of that, and just kind of preserving and enhancing the historic assets, or more so promoting, as you mentioned, Panama. That should be a note here as well. So any thoughts on this one? Yes, Yancy.
I think weaving in the history of Petaluma with just more like the current demographics, like there's other histories here too, so just kind of expanding what we're celebrating.
Great point. Great point. I see Panama giving you a clap. Great point. Any other thoughts on this one? Jesse, also thumbs up. Yes, Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, to build on Panama's point earlier about language, I mean, while we should definitely preserve the historic character, I think about like specifically the historic downtown and buildings as we build new, trying to incentivize developers to build aesthetically like not matching to the historic character, but trying to keep that, instead of, a massive 10-story modern glass high rise on the river. I think we just want to look at how what some of like our design elements are. I'm not an architect, but I think we have like Bill Wolford and others on GPAC and you guys. So thinking about future development also being in line with the character that we want Petaluma to be. Difficult because buildings doesn't happen like it used to, but there are ways we could probably, I've seen like Taco Bells being even like the signage looking a little bit more like the older, but like I'm not a big fan of Danville, but they have like a Taco Bell in their downtown, historic downtown that doesn't look like some new building. So some ways we can think about matching new development.
That's a great point. Yeah, often design guidelines do have provisions to make sure that newer buildings complement what's the context around it, and use either similar materials or colors or whatever it might be, or in some cases if historic, something that isn't drastically kind of different in look and feel and character. So that's a really good point. Thanks for that, Jesse. Yes, Delia.
I'm going to add, instead of it just being about preserving buildings, is there something about enhancing its livability, usability? Because that's what preserves it, is when they're things that we use and are still relevant.
Excellent. Excellent. Expanding livability. That's a great point. And livability of structures, or like the city in general, like structures, you're thinking something that's kind of flexible and could evolve over time.
Right.
Got it. That's great. Excellent. Any other thoughts on number 2 before we move forward? No? Okay. On we go to number 3. This one speaks to preserving and enhancing Petaluma's natural environment and distinct setting in the region, a community with a discrete edge surrounded by open space. So this one clearly builds more on the natural setting from Petaluma River and creeks and Petaluma marshlands, and kind of feeding off of that energy, ensuring that future growth doesn't impact those natural elements. Any thoughts here? Delia, I see your hand raised. I'm not sure if that was from the previous one or from this one. I think
That was the previous. Let me.
No problem. Any particular thoughts on this one, or does it read pretty well to everyone? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Cool.
This one is very in keeping too with the 2 public comments we heard this evening. Like fits within a guiding principle that is in there in terms of development along the river as well as our urban forest.
Great point, Heather. Jesse.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think a lot about sea level rise with like how high the river already was. If you went down to the river yesterday, thinking about it going up 6 feet is pretty shocking. And I know the NOAA maps, I reviewed the NOAA maps last year. It's pretty alarming. So I don't know how we could link to the NOAA maps in this principles and the principle 3, but yeah, just, you know, there's managed retreat plans for many cities away from the water. I know the river is an asset for Petaluma, but we may need to rethink our relationship to the river. I don't know if it's in this principle and how the whole GPAC wants to navigate that, but that is really something we have to address. So I don't know, Panama probably has a million thoughts on that too, but
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, you're welcome to send in those additional thoughts too if we don't cover them all here, but I see a lot of nodding heads. And we'll add support to the comments that are made. But that's a great point. Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to actually keep us moving here because I'm realizing we're about at our halfway point for this session, and we have a bunch of principles left to cover. So the next is to enhance the Petaluma River corridor while providing recreational and entertainment opportunities, including through active implementation of the Petaluma River Access and Enhancement Plan. So we've heard a lot about this from you all, as I'm sure you've been kind of thinking about this for many, many years of the river corridor and how that could be enhanced more as an amenity and how folks get to and through and across the river. So I know this is one of the items that you all are really interested in from the interviews we did. So any additional thoughts on this one to add now?
I guess.
Yes, Phil.
I guess the question I just have is, I know the Petaluma River Access and Enhancement Plan was written quite a while ago. Is this an opportunity to flag that it should be updated to reflect sea level rise and many other changes that have happened since it was created? I don't know if that would necessarily fall on this guiding principle, but just a thought that I had.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Phil. This is the opportunity as we're kind of going through this process of recognized plans that might be outdated. And there is a reference to kind of feeding off of the implementation actions from that plan. So there might be an opportunity to relook at that as an update. So that's a great point. Any other thoughts on this one? No, pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Please definitely let me know if I jump too quickly. But the next one is to stimulate and increase public access and use of pathways as alternative transportation routes by providing a safe, efficient, and interconnected trails system. So again, this is pathway systems that center on the creeks, the river, and the urban separator parcels. Really thinking about how different modes of transportation could travel to and through the city. I know this is a big kind of overarching question, and there's more even in the next set of guidelines, but any initial thoughts on this one? Yes, Jesse.
I guess I'd just love to see the word safe or safer used in there, like dedicated, protected bikeways, especially as we have the other principle of like age family friendly cities. And we know the city's thinking a lot about how to use that $20 million for transportation that just got from stimulus money, but some way to think about like Vision Zero in there or something.
I'm wondering if that also applies to the next principle. It's probably a twofer in that case. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Jesse. Any other thoughts from you all on this one? I'm just going to jump to the next one here because I feel like this is fairly closely related, but it's to provide for a range of attractive and viable transportation alternatives such as bicycle, pedestrian, rail, and transit. Again, this is meant to increase the multimodal access outside of just being in folks' cars. And to Jesse's point, making those travelways more safe and attractive is a key component of that. But any other thoughts on this one in particular? Yes, Yancy.
No, I just want to emphasize I really like the pedestrian-oriented boulevards and just having more of that. And I think through the pandemic, we kind of saw how downtown also changed with like outdoor seating and you know, kind of give us a glimpse of what else can happen.
Excellent. So in that sense, maybe having more of that, like street closures that are just pedestrian-oriented. Excellent. Thank you for that, Yancy. Any other thoughts on this one? Fairly straightforward. Excellent. So I'm going to move now to the next one. It's enhance downtown by preserving its historic character, increasing accessibility and residential opportunities, and ensuring a broad range of businesses and activities. So clearly this one's much more focused on the downtown area and continuing to build it out as a kind of a core feature of the city. This one seems pretty straightforward. Anything additional to add to this one, or any additional thoughts? Yes, Panama.
It's getting a little hard to move around downtown.
Mm.
And to really enjoy it. And it's starting to, I think, affect the quality of the experience downtown. And I'm wondering if there is a way to really focus on that quality of experience. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with just really intense long lines of cars generally. And who knows how pandemic related it is, but it'd be great if we could focus on that quality. So like we have the pieces of it here, a broad range of businesses and activities, a lot of residential and accessibility opportunities. But then how do we also focus on maybe some of the things that are taking away from some of the quality of the experience?
Gotcha. And you're thinking traffic and cars and
cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, Panama, do you specifically mean cars and traffic? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
Those damn road diets. Yeah.
More room for pedestrians. I'm hearing a lot of that makes sense. Yes, Jesse, you're up.
I mean, to build on Panama's idea, I mean, you know, there are so many best practices globally of cities permanently pedestrianizing streets, like Kentucky Street, for instance. How could we, you know, turn it into a amazing permanent pedestrian outdoor cafe? You know, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to reroute traffic, but cities around the world have done it. And anyway, just a thumbs up to an agreement with Panama.
Great. Thank you for that. Yes, Celia.
I would just add or build on that and then make sure we route traffic that we also think of the parking. Because when we make it attractive, it's going to attract people. And so we need a way to, otherwise the traffic will just move elsewhere. It will be a problem in other streets.
Great point. Right. So addressing parking that in areas that are close by that doesn't interact necessarily with the flow of pedestrian traffic. Great. All great points. Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next principle, and that's to foster and promote economic diversity and opportunities. This is fairly overarching, but it kind of gives a sense of increasing the economic base in the city to accomplish all the great objectives of the general plan. Obviously, there has to be some funding to help support that. So pretty kind of self-explanatory there, but any thoughts or additions that you all think might need to be added to this one principle? Yes, Panama.
I was really encouraged to see it calling out the economic health and sustainability element of the last general plan. And I think this is just an absolutely critical issue for so many of the things that we're trying to accomplish is the future of economic development in the city and how many people we can actually keep working in the city that live here in the city. And so I would love to see a focus at a level of, a deep dive element like what they had in the last general plan and this general plan as well, and really looking at what does economic development in the 21st century look like and how is work changing and how can Petaluma get in front of that to be able to take advantage of it. Every person that drives out of this town is spending time, energy, and money outside of our city. That we could be spending in our city with our families and in our community. I want to have an economic development plan that helps build that.
Great point, Panama. Thank you, Jesse.
I guess there's just two pieces of language that might be interesting to add here around small scale manufacturing, which is a way a lot of downtowns around the US are trying to rebuild their local economies. And also it's a lot of times businesses run by people of color. So it's an interesting way for us to maybe think about empty storefronts and how to support those. And then also green jobs. If we can support sustainability, a sustainable economic development strategy through the support of green jobs, maybe faster permitting, or I don't know, but ways to do it could be building on all the other principles.
Excellent. That's actually kind of a perfect segue from both your points on the next principle that's speaking to expanding retail opportunity to meet residents' need and promote the city's fiscal health while ensuring that new development is keeping within Petaluma's character. So the 2 points that you made about small scale manufacturing and things that kind of help rebuild the local economy, I think are completely relevant to this point as well. And Panama, I see your hand raised. What would you like to add to this one?
Cut this one.
Cut it? You don't like it at all?
Cut and paste or cut and discard. I think it would be more along the lines of appropriate level of retail development at this point. I mean, of all the guiding principles, we knocked this one out of the park from the last general plan to the point where it's we just have a bunch of empty storefronts or empty areas where we have it zoned for it. So I think this is one that I think could use some real rethinking and rewording around towards, ensuring an appropriate level of retail based on current needs of citizens and businesses, something like that.
That's a great point. And that just reminds me of what was mentioned earlier about spaces that might be a little more flexible, that aren't necessarily just for retail, to provide the flexibility to evolve as the need arises. Not to put words in your mouth, Panama, but it sounds like that's kind of what you're referring to as well, of not overbuilding something that we might already have a lot of. Jesse.
Oh, the only thing I'd add is another strategy cities are using for empty storefronts is bringing in like local community colleges to have courses in downtowns rather than campuses way off. So they're more accessible for students. There's activity on the street, there's liveliness, and to your point, Dave, about reuse of those spaces. Like to Panama's point, there's a lot of empty storefronts. So we could probably throw out retail, do some other more mixed, flexible use permits,
Makes sense. Yeah, so these are more kind of temporary uses to help fill the void. Yeah, like pop-up type uses. I think that's awesome. Yeah, that's needed throughout the country, I think, right now. Delia, see your hand.
Well, I agree with what's been shared, and the thought was on that action word about expand. It sounds like we don't need expand. Is it like to target the opportunities? Is it to repurpose? So just to change the word from what's been accomplished to where we want to go into the future.
Great point. Okay, Panama. No, you good? Okay. I'm going to move us on. I'm already over time, but this is just great discussion. I don't want to shorten it here, but the next one here is continue efforts to achieve a jobs housing balance, emphasizing opportunities for residents to work locally. I think this speaks to some of the comments we've already heard, but any additional thoughts on this one? Really, it's meant to provide housing that meets the job so folks can still live and work here and not have to travel far distances, but then also be able to stay here, as you mentioned, Panama, and spend their dollars here locally. Jesse.
I think a general plan has to address broadband now. Work from home can't happen without fast internet and affordable internet, especially as people kind of reskill and retool if they've lost their jobs, and if to incentivize work from home so we're not all commuting, maybe if we're hybrid schedule. So maybe there's somewhere else in the general plan to address broadband access, but somewhere it needs to be somewhere.
Great point. Great point.
This seems like a great one also for the language, the more active language instead of continue efforts. But to that comment that was made earlier.
By Panama, great point.
Yeah.
Maybe accelerate efforts or incentivize.
I like it. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to keep moving us on here. The next one is foster a sustainable community in which today's needs to not compromise the ability of the community to meet its future needs. Wow, that's a mouthful. Enhance the built environment, encourage innovation in planning and design, and minimize environmental impacts through implementation of green development standards. So this is purely based on the sustainability front, of making sure what we do doesn't impact future generations to enjoy their environment as well. Anything you all see here? Yes, Jesse.
I mean, if we're talking about the built environment, perhaps we should, as a whole GPAC, think about what kind of building we want to do, like low carbon, net zero, having some kind of language in there that it has a target, a climate target. Maybe it's incorporating some of the climate plan stuff into this, but being very specific about where we want to go, because if we're not, we won't get there and it's urgent. So something around that.
Great point. Adding more detail to that's a great point. Okay, I see a lot of nodding heads, so I'm going to keep on moving. And I don't mean to rush you all, but there will be an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to definitely send in additional comments on these if there's anything else that you wanted to add. I'm trying to get us over to the other discussion here shortly, but the next one is to ensure infrastructure is strengthened and maintained. And this is everything from capital facilities to public services such as streets, parks, storm drainage, and fire safety. Obviously critical parts of the city. Yes, Panama.
Yeah, so it seems here it's, big difference between the last plan and this plan is just the realities of climate change, and making sure that we're adapting our infrastructure to as much as we can towards the known impacts, known and the unknowns.
Great point. Jesse?
Just to reiterate, that's what I was going to say, Panama, but the reality of climate change, thinking about like climate ready infrastructure, maybe putting something in there. Concrete has huge GHG emissions. If we can think about like cutting edge material uses, obviously we have roads. It's hard you can't get rid of roads, but there are emerging sustainable materials to think about our future infrastructure.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to pause for 1 second. Eric, did you see that Gustavo joined us? I think this might be time for them to make the transition. If you want to give him access, I'm just going to pause here for 1 second as our interpreters do their transition. I'll let you all read this actually as that transition happens, but this is to integrate and connect the east and west sides of town. Another big topic that we heard a lot from the GPAC members when we interviewed you all. So any thoughts on number 13? Eric, has that transition been accomplished? Is Gustavo in?
Yes, he's been added. I see he's still muted. I gave him co-host access. He should be able to unmute himself.
Okay, cool. Panama, why don't you go ahead and jump to you?
I don't need to see the Rainier project in there, so I'd be happy to remove that. But overall, agree. It's integrating, connecting them, I think, but also, as we said earlier in the first piece, really making sure that we're providing a wide range of services and uses within neighborhoods on all sides, so that you don't necessarily have to go across town to get some of the basic services and your needs met.
Excellent, thank you. So team, I'm going to try to get us, actually, well, we only have these last two. So I'm going to just ask you to give feedback on these last two concurrently, just so I can get us over to the next part of the exercise. But so the next one is encourage cultural, ethnic, and social diversity. Obviously, we do know this is a very important aspect of everything that we do as part of this general plan, to ensure that it allows everyone and anyone to live here in the city, more so to encourage the diversity that already exists, but to continue to enhance that as well. And then the next one is to recognize the role that Petaluma holds in the region and beyond. Also kind of a big one, kind of the regional impacts of the city. So I know I'm just leaving you with the last two big nuggets, but Jesse, any thoughts on either one of those?
I actually feel like with 15, we need to recognize that we're the center for wildfire evacuations, and the region and for the county, and how we can adapt or share that responsibility with other places. Like, our planning needs to address the fact that for 3-4 months a year, we may grow in population from people living here evacuated. So just in new realities from the last general plan.
Good point. Thank you. Yes, Phil.
Yes, I was just thinking in terms of cultural, racial, and ethnic diversity. And 14 seems to just focus on housing and businesses, which is obviously, two areas to foster cultural, ethnic, and racial and all kinds of diversity. But it seems like we want to be a little bit broader. Not exactly sure how, but how do we, how do we become a city that's known for its diversity and welcomingness, that type of thing. It's more of a cultural thing.
Great point, Phil. Thank you. Yes, Yancy.
Yeah, I think supporting what the Ad Hoc Community Advisory Committee is, the work that they're doing, and then maybe taking it a step further and also becoming like a sanctuary city and taking maybe more active responsibility in this space.
Great point. Great point. Excellent. So again, please do continue to send your thoughts. If you did take the time to fill out your worksheets, even if you've already verbalized them, please do send that to Christina as well, and we'll make sure that that's included in the overall summary. But that was excellent. Heather, did you have a thought before we transition?
Well, I know we're up against time, but I'm curious if there was any topics that these 15 guiding principles didn't touch on, or you think it's not just, these have been some great comments, but are there other things that new guiding principles, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect wording, but those topics that maybe we need to, that weren't a thing or need a special attention or emphasis? I would hate to miss out on that from this group.
That's a great point, Heather. And I forgot to mention, these are other guiding principles based on the city's work and other engagement that have been put out there as well. So any thoughts on this in addition to that? And I am paying attention, and I'm just going to text Eric to let him know that we're running a little behind schedule so that we have a little more block. But Panama, please, we'll go to you first, followed by Jason.
Just the urban forestry public comment. I totally agree. I mean, extreme heat is going to be one of the key impacts of climate change. And so urban forestry is going to be, expanding our urban forest to be one of the key measures to do that. So that could be under the first one, taking proactive steps.
Great point. Great point. Yes, Jesse.
Oh, I just want to reiterate, and I know we have a tree committee. I'd love to see them, like, I'd love to meet them. I'd love to find out and share what the rules are around tree management in Petaluma. I mean, our neighbors next door, they cut down a bunch of trees. I have no idea if the city even knew about it. And just kind of what those steps are for citizen engagement. And, you know, I'm pretty engaged and so I'd love to, like, give citizens the tools to, you know, be aware of if a tree is about to get cut down next door to them, what the next steps are. So I don't know, put them in special shirts and have them walk around the city and meet them, and can bring them into our public engagement events, stuff like that. So we need more information. We need to be educated.
Awareness. That's a great point, Jesse. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts to Heather's point that might not even be on this list that we haven't thought about that we should have moving forward? Okay, so now we are going to transition to the next section of the conversation. And as you all saw in your homework, can you all see this map okay, by the way? Is the transition great? So we now want to talk just generally about areas of change and areas of stability. We'll start with change. And the idea is, the hope is if you can kind of specify what you think should be in these areas in the future, beyond just saying that they need to be changed, if we have a better sense of kind of where we can go from here would be great. And what we're going to be doing is actually using the map. You can tell us generally where you'd like that to go. We're going to use sticky notes, one red sticky note for areas of change and green sticky notes for areas of stability. And Michelle will be taking notes concurrently as we're adding the sticky dots or sticky notes to this map. Hopefully that all made sense. But who would like to start as we're thinking about areas of change? Yes, Panama.
Could you just clarify the dotted black line and the red line for everybody?
I sure can. The dotted black line is the city limits. So as you see that going around, those are the city limits as they stand today. And the red line is the urban growth boundary or the sphere of influence. So it expands a bit, as you can see in some cases, beyond the city limits, and in another case kind of fits within. So and that coloring, blues obviously water, greens parks, you'll 101 traveling through the middle. But thank you for that reminder, Panama, to let you folks know. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and just hand it over to you all. If you've given this some thought during your homework, if there's specific areas of change that you'd like to particularly call out now, this would be a great opportunity. And we'll make those notes on the map. Anything that you think isn't working that we can evolve? Yes, Jesse.
Well, there's the whole section between Petaluma Boulevard South and the river, and the train track and the river. The NOAA maps, it looks like that's pretty inundated, but to the public comment earlier, thinking about making that that green space so it's also accessible, walkable for folks coming to Petaluma by train, and having like a really beautiful nature-filled walk to the retail and the small businesses that we want to support. So somehow this is just an incredibly underutilized piece of land, multiple pieces of land throughout that whole area. But I'm sure other people have a lot more thoughts on that, what we should do with it.
Great point. Thanks, Jesse. So did I mark that correctly?
Yeah.
This area? Okay. Excellent.
Well, it's kind of like, a little to the left, but when you get off the train, or as you're walking around that whole smart station, I guess.
Got it. So kind of generally this area. Excellent. Thank you for that, Jesse. And just as a reminder, so the notes are being taken here on this side, but rest assured, we are definitely taking these notes down. This is just kind of generally to mark where we want areas of change. Any other thoughts? Yes, Panama.
Going to the other side of Petaluma Boulevard, up in the north of the outlets, in between the outlets and Corona. I think with improvements to Corona, farther north.
Up here.
Farther north, keep going. Nope.
Oh, further up,
Oh, this way.
up
North.
101.
Yeah, that's the outlets right there. So in between there and Corona.
Got it. And Michelle, you throwing those markers in for me? I could zoom out and grab it.
And it seems like a number of opportunities there, both retail and residential. And I think that, mixed with an improvement to Corona to make it much more pedestrian, bicycle friendly, could have really great connections to the train station, the second train station up there. Sorry, actually a little bit farther south. Is
Yeah, I think we got around here.
a little bit farther north, just a little bit up, a little bit up. Yeah,
There
perfect.
we go.
Nailed it.
Excellent. And this is why we have city resources in the room with us as well, for those of us that aren't completely familiar yet with all the street names. Thank you for that, Panama. That's excellent. That's excellent. Thank you for all that great detail too, of exactly what that change could look like. Yes, Yancy.
So there's this area in downtown over by Starbucks, and where Wicked Slush is, and up to Copperfields. You can walk that whole area, and I've seen a lot of people gather there, but it's not big. And so just kind of expanding a plaza area, or just the pedestrian friendliness of downtown. So I know we have that parking garage over here by the theater, and then we have the other parking garage over across the street from Hallie's Diner. And so that space in between could all just be walkable, pedestrian friendly. And there's like spaces like over by the ayahuasca place, where people sort of gather, but it's small too. So if we could just expand that, and that could also bring community together. You're walking, as you park on one side, you walk through downtown, you have to walk through a lot of spaces to kind of get back to your car where you're going. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So are you meaning like Putnam Plaza and like the trestle area and the walkway further going south on the river behind the ayahuasca area and the alleyways?
So just like that, yeah, I think that just general space between the two parking areas, or the parking garages. And I know the Petaluma Boulevard is cuts right through that. So I think you probably want to leave that alone, but just like the spaces in between those big parking garages.
Got it.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Yancy. Yes, Phil.
I'm just thinking of, I think maybe Jesse was pointing this out earlier, but I think your sticky note, I want to put a sticky note, just south of the intersection of Lakeville and Washington Street, right at basically connecting the train, literally the train station, being able to walk from the train station to downtown in a, pleasant environment. Right now it's mainly vacant, and I know that's a long time area, a central Petaluma specific plan challenge to develop that area, but hopefully get that happening. So there's a nice pedestrian friendly connection between train station, turning basin, and downtown.
Excellent. Excellent. Good point, Phil. Thank you. Panama or Jesse, were your hands still up? Or those? Yeah, Panama, you're next.
So the area in Midtown, right behind the block or the granary. So it's right, it's like the upper left corner of the number 4 sticky note.
Like right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of nice old dilapidated warehouses and old spaces, and there's seems like a ton of opportunity. So beautifully centrally located, so accessible by a bunch of different areas, right on the river. It just seems like a real opportunity for enhancement and what's that planning word everyone always uses? Activation.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you, Panama. Great point. Yes, Jesse.
Yeah, and just to Panama, wouldn't the like light manufacturing, green jobs, tech shop would be amazing, right? That would be such a good fit. The other thing I want to say is there's all these little bits of infill, like behind the Find on Western, there's that old, what must have been a gas station. It's for lease, and I think there's some maybe it's like caught up in permitting. I'm not sure. I haven't heard what's going on with that. And then next to that was Petaluma School of Ballet that vacated that space. There just seems to be like pockets, or like the corner on Petaluma Boulevard and B that is going to be a boutique hotel. I don't know if that's still happening, but there's just like pockets of infill that I can imagine being mixed use, housing above office / other stuff. So there's just some opportunities to address the housing crunch and the economic development stuff Panama brought up. Some good opportunities around there.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Phil.
Hopefully I won't piss off any bowlers, but I think that the bowling alley and the Vets Hall is an opportunity if the bowling alley ever decides to move on. Just out the southern end of town, a fair amount of new housing has sprung up over the years in that area. A little farther south, and not a lot of services outside of South City Market and Mr. Mom's. They could see some additional services down there, just south, or just the right of the word mountain.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Between
bring 7 up to the boulevard south.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Boom. Got it. Thank you. Excellent point, Phil. I know that bowling alley is a landmark of sorts.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, Panama.
I think Jesse and Phil were before me.
I'm done.
I think Phil's all set. Yeah.
Okay. Real activation of a bunch of the unused space at some of our shopping centers. So I'm thinking the Target shopping center, the Washington Place, and then I'm not sure the McDowell, both Deer Creek Village, as well as the Big Five McDowell development. But there's just
Walmart
really
is empty,
Circle to Walmart,
right?
You mean the
Then-
Kmart? The Kmart.
Sorry,
Kmart.
Kmart.
Yeah.
That's
So this, put 8, I would put it almost if you put it at the intersection of Washington and the highway.
Yep.
And make reference to, that's kind of the center of where most of our shopping centers are.
Yeah.
And ULI did a new
Mhm.
thing for Petaluma around the reuse of the shopping centers.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, housing, like how can we provide, use some of that space for housing? We have consistently empty parking lots, even during the, Black Fridays. How do we build up a little bit in those areas? So how do we really activate those a lot more and have a greater mix of uses and improve the pedestrian experience in those areas, in those shopping centers?
Great. Thank you for that. Jesse, did you have more to add to that as well?
Oh, I think I've forgotten.
There'll be, again, plenty of opportunity to send in. I know you all thought about this during your homework, so not the only chance to give us your feedback on this. Phil. Oh, Phil, I think you might still be muted.
Since I went after bowlers, now I'll go after golfers. What's our abandoned golf course on Freitas? I always forget the name of it. But to me, that's an opportunity to turn that golf course into, well, you can certainly infill it with houses or something like that.
So
I
the
think-
Adobe,
Freitas-
Adobe
The
Freitas-
Creek.
Adobe up at Casa Grande, other side, if you just go kind of diagonal up, see Adobe Creek Golf Course. I'm
Oh, I see it.
moving my
There it is.
cursor furiously to try to point it out.
I
Thank you,
got it.
Adobe.
I got
Adobe
it.
Creek, there it is.
There it is. Got it.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, why don't we, this is awesome.
Oh, I do remember
oh,
my
Go
comment.
ahead, yes.
Sorry.
No
And
problem.
I know this is the huge elephant in the room, but the fairgrounds. And I just want to make the comment that given sea level rise and concerns, it is set back from the river. It's this massive opportunity. We have to find a compromise where it works for the future of Petaluma. It's in an incredible location, has access to the library and the pool and shopping and even a supermarket. It's not a food desert, and it's just a lot. I'm not the expert on the fairgrounds, but it's a massive opportunity for affordable housing and addressing a lot of what we have, the principles in the general plan.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, Delia, you haven't had a chance to contribute on this.
I'll just be quick on,
No problem. Take your
on some of those green space. Is there any way to connect some of that green space? Because when you look at the Adobe Creek, there's a little bit of green here and there, and obviously the big park, the Schoenberg. And we were talking about accessibility, bike lanes and so on. If somewhere in this, we can start thinking about how do you connect those.
Just the green spaces in general
Yep.
throughout the city. Great point. Great point. Okay, I keep getting reminders from folks that we're running up against time here. I try to get us a little bit of a cushion, but we do have some time, hopefully about 10 minutes or maybe a little bit less at this point, to talk about areas of stability. That was a lot of great information about areas that can change, and I really, really appreciate all the detail that you provided as to how they can change. But what areas in town do you think doesn't necessarily need any new development? And why would you say that? Or why do you propose that? Any thoughts on that? So what areas, there's got to be some, right, throughout the city that are really functioning well the way they do, or you just don't want to see any new development in because it's already inundated. Any thoughts on that piece? Yes, Jesse.
Well, I think schools and green spaces and seem to be pretty set in place, in motion, and they are a huge asset. So any way we can enhance them, but yeah, I think those places, schools and green spaces, are pretty permanent, hopefully.
That goes back to the connecting of green spaces as well, as we just heard. Excellent. Any other thoughts on that? Areas that you think should be essentially preserved the way they are? You find them particularly stable? And again, this isn't your only opportunity to provide this input, so if you had additional thoughts to share down the road, that works too. Any thoughts there? I think it's definitely easier to think about areas of change when we're doing this exercise than it is areas of stability. I mean, I'll just maybe think about, like you all mentioned, the downtown as being obviously an area that is precious and working well, but deserves some type of change. Is there anything there that you also find maybe stable? We talked about different type of uses that might want to be there versus just retail to help it survive.
Yeah, I mean, we have a historic element in the last general plan probably, so honoring that and keeping the historic buildings intact. And I don't know if there's an industrial historical element anywhere, given the history of, I don't know, chicken farming and such, but I don't know how that would work, how that would play into this.
Great point. Great point. Anything else? We don't need to belabor this point at all. I mean, it sounds like we kind of had a really good energy around areas that we'd like to see evolve into something different. Yes, Yancy, any thoughts on this?
I really like the big murals, like the one behind the stairway behind Wicked Slush. That one's really cool, but it's still hidden. And then there's like that other huge mural that says Petaluma once you get off the 101. But it's like on the edge of town, so it'd be just cool to keep those for sure and have more murals.
Excellent. Is that coming into downtown kind of?
So there's in some of the alleyways, Dave, we've had a few efforts where we've done murals, and then I think the one south of town is actually in the county, but it's the new what is it, a storage facility that they've done a Petaluma mural on.
Here somewhere.
But we do have lots of hidden gems
Awesome.
of murals. You turn a corner and there's a mural.
I do remember seeing, a few downtown.
So it's probably a comment more like the schools and the connecting the green spaces. It's kind of, they're mixed throughout, not one specific location.
Good point. Thanks for that. Excellent. Yes, Panama.
The area along the highway south of the outlets.
Along the highway south of the outlets. Yep, I'm with you. Up here.
A little bit further and east of the river.
Okay. Let me grab a little sticky note. I'm with you. Keep going.
Yeah, it's beautiful area, right on the river. It's a bit isolated. So actually farther south.
Is it here somewhere?
That's the outlets. So just to the south of there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And on the other side of the river.
Got it.
Yeah. It kind of even on the other side of the railroad.
Oh, got
it. No, that's the highway. So farther down, to the right.
Got it.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Yep.
Thank you for
The way
that.
to really access that is to, put in Rainier, do pretty major developments off of Petaluma Boulevard, puts it right on the river, the potential for pretty significant runoff into the river. So yeah, that'd be an area. But I think it's great to be able to be seeing some open space and beautiful old oaks as people drive by and people associate Petaluma with that.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
That's also one of the areas that you can now access. You see it from the train and you see it from the Lynch Creek Trail, or where maybe it's not the Lynch Creek Trail there, although it is the Lynch Creek Trail there. It crosses, and the path along the SMART train and driving on the freeway, but you don't ever get there. Like you can't park and get there, and you can't. So it's a pretty special area.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Veronica, I do see your hand raised. I appreciate it. We are going to take comments from members of the public as we move into the next phase of the agenda. And actually, perfect timing. Unless you all had any other comments here in the next 45 seconds, I really appreciate all this fantastic input. Can I nominate anyone from the team to actually give us a recap? Phil, is that you raising your hand to do the recap for us? That's awesome.
No, that's me. That's me raising my hand for one thing I forgot, and I can't remember the name. What's the name of our much fought over park up on Sonoma Mountain that seems to have dropped off the radar?
Lafferty?
Lafferty, thank you. Lafferty Park. I mean, has that ever been in the general plan, and do we want that in this general plan? Lafferty, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that Lafferty? That's not, where would that be? Up here somewhere? Is that here?
It's outside of the city limits.
Got it. Okay.
But so it's kind of LAFFERTY, I think.
Got it.
Oh, I have one more important thing to say. I heard from a colleague that it's been pretty hard to work throughout Sonoma County on the Bay Area Regional Trail. Is that what it's called? the
The Bay Trail?
I guess there's a piece of, maybe it's not within Petaluma city limits, but if there's a way for us to collaborate with those folks to, I don't know, help be part of the larger Bay Area. Oh, everyone's here. Hi.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that was perfect timing. Everyone's back and joining us. Thank you for that comment, Jesse. Hi, all. Thanks for coming back to the main room. I hope you all had a great conversation. I know we did. So we really quickly wanted to just bounce around each one of the rooms. I know there was a ton of conversation to be had. And I would rather actually give us an opportunity now, all talk as a group, if there's any additional thoughts to share. So we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I'd like to either ask the group facilitators and or a nominee from each group just to give us a really high level of just themes maybe that were spoke of both during the guiding principles, but then more importantly, maybe the areas of change and stability discussion. So I'm going to start with group 2, just to stall and give myself time to get my notes together.
I had a feeling that was coming. I'm going to, just for reference, go ahead and share my screen really quick, but I'll keep it short. And I tried very hard to find a volunteer unsuccessfully. Can people see my worksheet?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll keep this super brief. A couple of just overall comments, noting the need to write the vision statement and the guiding principles in conjunction, which is exactly what the plan is. And Christine volunteered to do the writing for us. Thank you, Christine. Also, a great idea shared about narrowing down the guiding principles to a small number of key principles that then get threaded throughout the general plan as themes, as a way to maintain consistency across the prescribed elements that we need to use to organize the GP, and do it in a graphical way to make it, which also will assist with making the general plan very accessible. Otherwise, the group had a lot of fantastic thoughts across the board. I'd say with a focus primarily on historic character and what that really means in terms of, is it just buildings or is it the people? And to what extent do we want to preserve it relative to accomplishing some of the other city goals? Lots of support for sustainability issues in the river in general, but otherwise, very interesting points about 5 and 6 and the need really to have a single mobility and transportation focused guiding principle that doesn't treat paths and walking and biking paths simply as recreational resources, but actually weaves them in a seamless way into the broader transportation system. Obviously, lots of interest in downtown. Interesting comments on economy. People were struck by how much detail the guiding principles go into and being somewhat prescriptive about the future of the economy. I had a lot of interesting thoughts about the benefits or costs of taking that approach, and noting that we need to rethink the future of economic development in Petaluma in the context of all these other general plan decisions. And then finally, a lot of great comments on this whole question of the language used in guiding principle 14, how we need to definitely bring that up to date, and not just talk the talk, but weave in change into the systems that we use to govern ourselves and make decisions, the way we design and create our communities in a way that truly is equitable and addresses fundamental injustices in the community. Few additions as well, noted that housing was not specifically mentioned in the principles and highlighted the need to make sure we address explicitly the need for sustainability and finances. Very briefly on the mapping side, a lot of great ideas again. A lot of focus on the east side and the need for a more balanced mix of use, in addition to taking advantage of what seem to be or could be community points of interest and gathering spots, plus comments a lot on the fairgrounds as we expected, in addition to the downtown. Noting, interestingly, not just the fairgrounds themselves, but the need to think about their future in the context of the surrounding neighborhoods and their connections to other parts of the city. I think I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron. Christina, I'm going to nominate your group next, if you're ready or someone from your group is, to give us a quick recap.
Can we actually go last? Because we had some really great notes that are getting transferred over to our map right now.
Sure. I was hoping you weren't going to say that because that means
Sorry, dude.
all good. Actually, Michelle, why don't we tag team this? You did a great job of taking notes. I'll bring up the screen and you let me know if anything I forget. But we also had a fantastic discussion. I'm hoping you all can see this. But we started with a suggestion just overall to rework the language for all the principals to make them more active, to promote and create versus just maintain and enhance, which we thought was a great idea. Also just age friendliness, family friendliness, livable city, just kind of a consistent themes that we heard throughout. Weaving in the history of the city with the current demographics, and celebrating the history of the city was something that came up as well. Let's see, emphasizing safer streets, folks thought was really important. When we talked about the river, sorry, taking one step back, an idea to actually look at the Petaluma River Access and Enhancement Plan and reworking it potentially, since it might be fairly outdated at this point. Pedestrian orientation came up a bit when we talked about the downtown and reducing the car traffic that's moving through there. And folks talked about permanent pedestrian streets potentially, or closing down boulevards for just pedestrian use being emphasized. And then reworking traffic and parking so that it isn't a big emphasis necessarily downtown. When we talked about the economy, it's kind of rethinking about the economy, really focusing on the economic health and sustainability element, thinking about things like small scale manufacturing that many downtowns are thinking about now, and how these empty spaces that are currently throughout the downtown could be used for pop-up stores or events or other uses that could help it bring life to the downtown during this downturn. But then also, as new development comes on board, making those spaces flexible so that different types of uses can actually go in those spaces, and we're not just regulating retail. And then there was a thought that number 9 should maybe be scrapped generally altogether, because we don't necessarily want to continue to expand the retail that already maybe isn't working in the area. But again, rethinking about how that could transition to something different. With jobs, really emphasizing the work from home opportunities and broadband access being a big component of that, as we obviously are all kind of in that phase right now. With sustainability, thinking specifically about what that means, the type of green buildings, climate actions, and other sustainable details. So adding a little bit more meat to this one in general. Related to that, just kind of when we're thinking about infrastructure, thinking about the reality of climate change and how that impacts it. And then with the cultural, ethnic, and social diversity, expanding this beyond topics of housing and business, and feeding off of the energy the ad hoc advisory committee is working on currently, and thinking about stuff like a sanctuary city or more active responsibilities for the city. I think I just made it through. Michelle, is there anything I forgot that you think of? No? Yeah, I'm seeing head nods from my group. Excellent. And then the last piece was when we're thinking about other type of principles, to think about the urban forestry plan and different ways of civic engagement to kind of bring some more awareness around that piece as well, particularly the tree committee and their work. Whew, that was a lot. Michelle, are you comfortable taking the next piece? Or anyone from the group want to talk about, oops, if I could bring it up here. Michelle, are you with us?
Yeah, I don't mind talking to nobody else from our group. There were a lot of great comments about areas of change, specifically with emphasizing the connection between the railroad and the river, and the connection to downtown, and the different bike trails and pedestrian trails that could be improved. Following along with the pedestrianization and improving the pedestrian experience, there were a lot of great comments about of reworking how downtown and the different areas within it function, and maybe making pedestrian only streets and walkways between areas like 2 parking garages that are in downtown or more alleys, and activating a lot of those pedestrian spaces to be more active plazas and centers. There were also a lot of great comments about the existing shopping centers that around town that are underutilized or empty, and how they could be they could have new mixed uses and incorporate housing and other types of uses in services in those spaces. And also a lot of comments about connecting green spaces and using the old like Adobe golf course that's currently abandoned, and incorporating more housing and park spaces into those areas. There weren't that many comments about areas of stability because it was nearing the end, but people really like the historical buildings and aesthetics and aspects of downtown, and if there are any ways to emphasize that or incorporate it into new development within downtown. Also, a lot of comments about furthering the connection between trails and the river, and different trails and access points and open spaces within the river or along the river. And also making known a lot of the murals that exist and are spread around town that people may not know about.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anything else we missed the group wants to add before we move to group 3? There's a lot. Oh, yes.
Yeah, Dave, it really was the best small group out of all the small groups. Some of the best input.
Yeah, it really was the best.
I like that plug. Well done, team. That was fun. Okay, we're going to transition now to group 3. Christina, over to you.
Great. Hi. So I'm going to ask Lillian to share her screen, and then Ali is going to take us through what we talked about with our guiding principles.
Thanks, Christina. And for all you other facilitators, Christina was the only one that was successfully able to volunteer the group members to present. So I guess she's setting the standard for you all. So we had so much great conversation that I think we only got through like 6 of the existing guiding principles, but we had great conversation. I think they overlap with a lot of the ones farther down. So we, sorry, Lily, can you stay at the top just for now? Thanks. So for the first one, we kind of did call out that the language about this kind of close-knit community and neighborly seems kind of dated and exclusionary and should be updated. So I think that ties in with some of the other guiding principles farther down about being more open in general. We had a lot of discussions about accessible and non-motorized modes of transportation around the city, and mixing uses, meaning mixing housing and commercial, and making complete neighborhoods, and can consider diversifying some single family neighborhoods by allowing smaller multifamily uses. We talked a lot about Petaluma's historic character, including both the buildings, the built environment, and the history of agriculture, and how to make sure that those are incorporated and going forward, and trying to embrace 2021 and not trying to keep everything the same and preserve it in a historical nature that can never be changed, but how to kind of complement the existing history and further that going forward. A lot of discussion about the natural environment, particularly around fire and open spaces and the tree plans, how much agriculture is surrounding Petaluma, and kind of potential monoculture about vineyards and their use of groundwater. Also talking about the maintaining offsets from the waterways and not developing in the floodplains, and the park master plan that should be done. And okay, I'll try and go faster in the next few. Enhancing the Petaluma River corridor, we talked about access to the Petaluma River, and a lot of discussion about dredging, which I think was a little over my head, and talked about the access of pathways as alternative modes of transit. A lot of discussions about how to cross 101 safely and without using cars, and about how to integrate the east and the west side together, and how to have east siders have access to trail systems that, for instance, the SMART trail is mainly accessible only on the west side, and having bikeways on streets where there's not room to put in separate bike lanes, but potentially having share roads or other indications for bike infrastructure. And then number 6, I think, was just talking about using the floodplain area on the west side of the 101 as a potential kind of hub for a multi-use system. So I think that's about as far as we got, but hopefully those all link in with many of the.
We got a couple more. We skipped.
Oh, do we?
Can
Okay.
you go down just a little bit more? Thank you, Allie, for doing this.
No worries. Oh, yes, we had a great discussion about fostering economic diversity. So kind of throwing out this Telecom Valley idea and having more emphasis on promoting diverse businesses than what we see today, and incubation of businesses, and further expanding retail opportunities with green businesses, BIPOC-owned businesses, and not necessarily needing to focus only on small businesses, but how to incubate businesses that might be able to thrive here in Petaluma.
All right, and one more down on 13. We got some comments.
Oh yeah, okay. So this is a lot about the integration of the east and west sides of town. Sorry, I have dogs.
And deleting parking minimums. All right. Thank you so much, Allie. And then Janice Cater Thompson is going to, ooh, that was a fast switch. Nice, Luann, to talk us through our areas of change and stability. Janice, are you there and able to unmute? Let's see.
I'm unmuted.
There you are. Great.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about, just different areas for land use and transportation, and the importance of connecting to like the smart stations with higher density. We talked about adding Petaluma, looking at Petaluma Boulevard North from, say, the police station, but on the east side, looking at the developments that are there now and what could possibly be, and how that integrates with also setbacks from the river because of the proximity to the river. We talked about shopping centers, the importance of upgrading those for multi-use uses. Oh boy, I wish I had notes, and I don't really have notes. Christine, can you help me with any of this stuff? Because I can't see it to read.
That was some good commentary. We had a lot of thoughts about changing land uses in corridors, making the corridors more cohesive and safer for folks to get through. There's some interest in looking at areas just outside the urban growth boundary that have been identified in the housing element as possible places for expansion, including adjacent to the Corona Road Station and near Eli and Lakeville on the east side of town. Folks were pretty passionate about preserving or really thinking about stepping back from the river, making sure that we have our floodways and our marshlands kept preserved. And I think that was about it. We have some more specific notes, but those were the overall trends. The fairgrounds came up a few times as well.
Excellent. Well done, all. Round of applause. That was fantastic. Really a lot of great information for us to use, carry forward. And I just want to reiterate that if you did fill out your worksheets or any other information on the area of change and stability, please do email those to Christina, and she'll get it to the team to make sure we incorporate that with the summary moving forward. I just wanted to pause here 1 sec now that we're all back as a group to see if there's any other thoughts or comments on this exercise we just did before we move forward and give you a sense of what's to come. So any members of GPAC have any other thoughts they want to share? Yes, Jesse.
Oh, I just wanted to ask the professional planners with their AICP next to their name. When you look at general plans from other cities, like Christina, Dave, is like Panama suggested in our group, which we all agreed, like more active language, more instead of maintain or preserve, and like changing it to encourage or incentivize or accelerate. Is that language you see in other city general plans that you've worked on or working on now as we change and adapt to 2021?
Well, we're certainly interested in making this a working general plan, not a brick on a shelf or a digital brick on a shelf. But Ron, as our resident person who does lots and lots of these kinds of projects, do you have any trends that you're seeing?
The simple answer is yes. General plan should reflect what the people of that place want it to clearly communicate. And yeah, we would typically favor more proactive, active, verb-oriented set of statements, particularly within the policy statements, to be very clear, clearly express the intent, especially if it's any kind of controlling or mandatory policy. Yeah, the clearer and more directional all the elements the GP can be, the better. Because again, what you're doing is crafting a plan that future policymakers, council members need to interpret and make decisions based on, right? So.
And the principles, Ron, do you see them being very specific, like low carbon construction materials or climate ready infrastructure, or I don't know, like getting really specific in the guiding principles, or do we wait for later in the process for that kind of specific language?
That's a great question, and it came up in our small group as well. At the early stages, at least in a planning process, we would typically keep them more general because we don't yet have the information at hand or the level of public input we would need to make the types of decisions that would be implied in a very specific set of guiding principles. That being said, and so the initial draft, which we'll initially bring to council through you guys, would be a vision and a set of guiding principles that are clear in intent and very direct, but not overly specific. That being said, when we get to the end of the planning process and have already gone through the steps of making some of the tough decisions along the way, and the plan at that point is very specific about it, what it identifies as steps needing to be taken, we could at that point revisit the initial drafts of the guiding principles, and at that point, if it seemed to make sense to re-add some specificity, we could consider that at that point. I mean, I was curious just looking at these, like when these were written during the planning process, because of how specific they are in some places.
Yeah, thanks. That's super helpful.
Great question.
Heather, did you have a thought? I saw you nodding.
No, am I muted? I think that Ron said what I would have said as well, as to the themes, and then get into more of the specifics with your implementation and your policy on how you're going to put that into action. And I also think that the narrative is you can have your guiding principle that's theme based, and then the narrative can touch on then perhaps where, and I think we see that in some of those guiding principles where it talks about housing or it talks about job housing balance to implement what that theme is. And then once you start getting into your policies and your programs, you're getting into the real nitty gritty of how to implement that theme.
Thanks. And I saw Bill.
Thanks.
Bill
Yeah,
hand
I
up.
see Bill's hands raised, and then we'll go to John. Bill, you're up.
Yeah, in the presentation, I heard mention the idea of enhancing infrastructure to support working from home. And that triggered some questions in my mind. Architecture and engineering has really suffered from what I see from people working at home. It doesn't function. Our industry is too collaborative. The same question I think could be asked of retail. Is retail shopping dead? It seems like there should be a discussion or some kind of insight to what we think the future holds for how we work and how we purchase.
And Ron, won't that come somewhat with when we start looking? We have we do have a retail specialist on the team. We do have our economic. So I think there will be some of those discussions as we get into that. I think that's a great point. We, in the small group that I was in, there was lots of talk about, creating neighborhood nodes so that you had a mix of uses in the different neighborhoods, so you didn't have to go across town to get your daily needs met. Well, a lot of times when you start talking about that, then the economics, consultant will say that you can't support that. So we have to come up with some balance. We don't want to say you have to do it when nobody will do it and it won't happen. We have to figure out where's that balance of putting that into place in the land use framework, but in a way that it's going to actually work with the other, people need to do what we're wanting them to do. And we have to figure out that balance. So I think that is a good point, Bill. And I think that we will have some discussions of that later in this process when we start getting the information and we start coming up with ideas and then kind of truthing it with our technical experts that are on this team.
That's fine. I just wanted to mention it. Thank you.
Hey, just two other quick related thoughts. It came up in our group too, and it points to the need to do two things. One is be sure we're clear about what changes that we've been experiencing over the last year and a half are here to stay and plan for those. But at the same time, do everything we can so that the city and its planning systems and processes are resilient and can adapt to what are likely to be a whole range of shocks and stressors on the systems in different ways that we end up doing things because of forces beyond our control, right? So there's going to be more pandemics. We know there's going to be lots of natural hazards. We don't know how it's going to change the way we live, but how can we write plans? How can we develop city systems that can more quickly adapt to those changing conditions?
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Heather. Great question, Bill. Next, we're going to go to John, followed by Janice. John, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. The comments I have is about what's happening next week, since we're taking this and actually opening it up to the public for the first time next week. And we've only had like a day or two notice so far, and there's only like 3 days we're starting this process. And I asked a couple of folks if they even heard about it or knew about it, and they have no clue that this is happening this next week for these Zooms that are going on. It's such short notice, and it didn't quite get out into the media. So I'm going to recommend that you do a really hard push in network neighborhood, and to get to reach as many people as possible, saying these meetings are happening, because those folks are already going to be looking on their computers and a little more tech savvy, and reach folks that way. Also, since we missed the Argus Courier, did not have much to say about it, what was going on this last Thursday. It should have been there, was not. So we need to get into the Press Democrat, maybe even a full page ad saying, hey, we're having these big events that's happening here in Petaluma, please join in, because otherwise you could have a very limited audience next week to talk about all these things. So you need to do a whole media blast really fast.
Appreciate the input, John. Thank you for that. I do know there was email blast and social media push, but your point is well taken. We definitely want to make sure that everyone is aware of these meetings happening. And we're going to talk about those in a second as well, about the format and what we're hoping to share. And we can follow up on that as well. But thank you for that point. And any other feedback you all have on that front, we're all ears. Janice, you're next.
Well, I just felt as though there wasn't, even with city staff, enough understanding of the importance of the Corona overcrossing, the smart station, safety, and then there's the Scott property. And there's supposedly restraints for the Scott property. Well, that is an integral piece of property to make the Corona station truly viable. And so I want to know what the problems are with the properties, why staff is not looking at Corona. And, in the notes, it's just about Rainier and Caulfield. Well, I know the traffic that is on Corona, and now there's all of a sudden a sign saying that the Corona overcrossing is a truck route. So I think we need to understand where city staff is coming from on that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Yep, duly noted. We'll add that to the notes here as well and continue to have that conversation moving forward. So if there are any other thoughts or comments On that topic, we could segue to what John was referring to, and that's what's upcoming in fall engagement. Hoping you all could see my screen okay. So we're leading into
Dave?
it. Oh yes, Panama.
I'm sorry. I know that in our group, we had some members of the public that were trying to comment on areas of stability and activation. And are we just going to hold all the public comment to the end of all the topics?
Yes, this is actually going to be the last topic. Thank you for that reminder, but this will be the last topic on the agenda. Then we're going to have plenty of time for public comment. I appreciate that, Panama. Thank you. So yeah, members of the public, thank you for sticking with us. This is just going to be a quick 5-minute or so presentation, and then we're going to go to public comment and give you all time to give us your feedback. And actually, on that note, these 4 meetings that are coming up, they are broken up by area. So there's 4 quadrants that we broke the city up into, and we're going to have area specific conversations with folks coming up at these 4 meeting times, starting next Monday, followed by next Wednesday, then the following Monday and Wednesday. And these are going to be run very similar to what we just experienced here today, where it's going to be more so of a background, giving folks an idea of what this project is all about for folks that haven't been plugged in, a little bit of what we've done with you all to date, but then we're going to break up into small groups and have similar discussions, more so starting a little bit higher level about assets and opportunities. But really kind of starting to dive in and understand how these particular areas of the city are functioning and how they could evolve and change over time. So we hope, and we'll talk a little bit about your role in those meetings, but we hope that you do attend and listen in and really kind of hear from the larger public, as they aren't necessarily a part of these meetings, so that we can kind of get our finger on the pulse as well of what's important citywide, and then we'll come back and kind of report back to you all again, for those that weren't able to attend, what we heard from folks at those meetings. And those will be obviously held virtually in a very similar format that we've been running these meetings. Yes, Chris, did you have a question about that?
Not a question, but just a comment. Is there any possibility of the getting notes from the groups tonight around areas of development or opportunities in this different areas? Because I'm planning on attending Monday night, and I would be happy to go, oh, well, the GPAC talked about X, Y, or Z, just to let folks know what we're thinking about, to maybe get some conversation going. And it would be great to have sort of a compendium of what was discussed tonight for these, for all these areas.
Yeah, great question, Chris. We will try our best to get kind of notes together fairly quickly. And while we'd love for you to be there to kind of help spur discussion, we also encourage you all to actually kind of maybe take more of a passive role, I would say, to allow members of the public to kind of have their own discoveries and conversation. We'll try to bring to the discussion as facilitators the conversations that have been had with you all. And try to bring that kind of lens to it, but we're hoping to kind of let the conversation evolve from members of the public. There will be opportunities, with that said, Chris, where, and I'll speak about this in a second, but we're also going to do pop-up workshops and other type of formats. We're going to go out to the community, and we'd love to have you all there as a member of the GPAC, representative GPAC, and helping kind of spur the conversations in that format, if that makes sense. So we can talk a little about that as well. Christina, do you have a thought on that? I saw you on mute.
Yeah, we just need to be careful of Brown Act concerns and make sure that, we really would love for folks to attend. We just need to make sure that we're not discussing GPAC business outside the GPAC meeting.
Great point.
But can also, I think, a great way for the GPAC to really be kind of ambassadors with some of these events is to help us get the word out. We have put it in the community newsletter. We have put it out on social media. We've been sending it to everyone that has signed up for general plan updates, those kind of things. But also, the General Plan Advisory Committee are great ambassadors to, especially in the areas you live or you work in these quadrants, to get that information out. And that is a great way that you all can be assets to encouraging people to engage in those ways as well. So just kind of want to plug that as the power of this group of people has to reach your neighbors, reach your coworkers, your extended communities within the community, to try to encourage people to engage with us and talk with us. That would be very appreciated.
That's a great point, Heather. That's a great point. Yeah, that you all are our connection to the rest of the community. You're a huge conduit. I'll just note one more thing, that these meetings, as the GPAC meetings, will also be recorded and posted to the project website. So for those that weren't able to attend, they can still go there, gather information, and have an opportunity to give us feedback after these meetings as well. But with that, Panama, did you have another thought on this?
Yeah. And I'm sure, it's a couple caveats. I know we're in the very, very beginning of a 2-year process of outreach, and there'll be a lot more outreach. And so I realize that as I'm making this next comment. And I also realize that probably the statements I'm about to make are shared by people about their own neighborhoods, and they feel their neighborhoods are very special and unique. But I just wanted to point out that that Midtown is grouped with West Petaluma, the Southwest Petaluma. And Midtown, I think, is in a really unique place in our city right now. It's kind of ground zero for future of pretty significant development. It's in between the rail station developments. It's in between whatever we as a community decide to do with the fairgrounds. It's got some of the major transportation corridors running through it: Washington, D Street, the train station, Lakeville. I mean, it is just such a crazy little area, and it has needs and a future that is going to be so different than southwestern Petaluma. And so I just hope that there's an opportunity for the city and the consultants to really try to carve out some chances to hear from Midtown residents and to really look at that Midtown unique situation that I think we have.
Great point. Thanks, Panama. Appreciate that. Yes, Jesse.
Question for Heather. Heather, is it okay if we post on some of the Petaluma Facebook groups that we're in, like the school groups and the kid groups and stuff?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, your school groups, I mean, we're sending it out to like all of our networks and our, avenues, but yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay, sure. I'll do it right now.
Awesome. Jesse, I'm going to just go one more further. We could probably even provide you with the social media kind of graphics and little blurbs that the city team.
Oh, don't you worry.
I figured
I got it.
Okay. Just try to,
I'll do the link and they can go to the website, and then they'll always have the web
perfect.
link. And
Perfect. Just trying to make it as easy
you're
as
good. You're good.
Thank you. Yes, Janice. Or was that from before, Janice?
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
It seems like Nextdoor is something that a lot of people get on, and there's a lot of chat on Nextdoor. If somebody that really knows how to use it, it could be quite valuable for getting information out.
Great point. Heather, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jessica, I believe she posted the Nextdoor, didn't she? Isn't that?
Yeah, I would just making notes to check with Jessica what if she did Nextdoor. And I know that Nextdoor has different limitations on who can post in what groups on Nextdoor. So any of you that are on your Nextdoor for your specific area too, it's a great way to reach your neighbors.
Please do. Yep. Excellent. Jesse, I think, was that your hand from previous, or did you have another thought? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you all for that great feedback. Really appreciate it. So I mentioned the pop-ups. We also do have a series of pop-ups coming up. 4 of them are planned because we had to kind of get out in front and make sure we had a booth at these various farmers markets coming up on August 28th, 31st, September 9th, and 11th. We also are planning to have pop-ups in front of Lola's Market to hope to reach the Latinx community, as well as possibly popping up in front of a couple churches at Petaluma Market, Petaluma Library. So we want to kind of go to places where we know folks are going to be, given this strange time that we're in, to make sure that we're hearing from multiple perspectives and multiple voices. So this isn't by any means an exhaustive list, but the 4 that we had to plan specifically around events that are happening have been planned. But I'll pause here, or if you guys could share this with us later, with any thoughts that you all might have on additional places to think about popping up during these times. I will say, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a couple slides, but this is the place where we'd also love some support from you all. So if any of these dates you think you might be available, we would love to have some representation from members of GPAC at these events to help us co-facilitate the conversations. And I'm not going to ask you to tell us right away right now, but soonish, and we'll send out a reminder email to you as well. If you have any interest, we would love to have your support at these pop-ups as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ron to cover this piece. Ron, over to you.
Thank you, Dave. And Christina, we can tag team on this if you'd like. I just wanted to highlight a few of the additional upcoming engagement activities. I believe Christina emailed you all specifically about the upcoming Planning 101 event. We had originally thought we'd do that as part of a GPAC meeting, and then really just kind of ran out of time, and thought it in retrospect that it might be a good thing to also make very public, and so we're doing it as a public event in partnership with Know Before You Grow. Thank you, Dave. And in terms of where we're headed, so part of what we try to do is hear from a variety of different people using a variety of different approaches, asking questions in a slightly different way, all towards building towards the work product that includes a planning phase, in this case, visioning and guiding principles initially. And so a culminating event of sorts from a public perspective will be the workshop on September 29th. So again, please mark your calendars. And another interim step will come to the council later in the fall with recommended vision and guiding principles. But in the interim, we're going to share some key findings from the existing conditions work with the council on October 8th. And then interspersed in the fall will be a series of meetings with committees, commissions, bringing them up to speed on some of the key findings from our work and input from the public related to their areas, their spheres of interest and focus. And then also, as Heather mentioned earlier, we're going to have a series of educational forums focused on some very salient topics for the city, including exactly the topic that somebody suggested, retail. In addition to, I believe, climate change and equitable development. And I'm spacing the fourth right now. Thank you. Sorry?
Transportation.
Yeah, thank you. City of the future, yes, including transportation and land use. Christina, anything else to add that I missed?
That was it. Thank you. We are very grateful to Know Before You Grow for hosting us on the 8th. City calendars are packed, so it is nearly impossible to find alternate dates to have these televised meetings. So thanks to them for hosting us.
Excellent. Thank you all. So lastly, as I think we've just kind of mentioned throughout this piece of the presentation, your contributions would be greatly appreciated to help advertise and publicize all these events that are coming up through all of your channels, and all the networks that you might have. And again, let us know if there's anything that we can do to help support, make that easier for you. As I mentioned earlier, it's really assisting at those pop-ups would be great. So again, think about those dates. We'll follow up with an email and see if we can at least get a handful of you that might be interested. Even if it's just one of you per each one of those pop-ups, it would be a huge help to have you represented there. And then, as we mentioned earlier, also just going to the other events, even though we know it's a huge time commitment that we've already asked of you all, but to be there and present and to hear what other members of the public are saying at those meetings before we bring it back to you hearing it firsthand would be great. So with that, unless there's any other questions, miraculously, we're only about 3 minutes behind schedule, and we're going to go ahead and move to public comment. So I'm going to ask members of the public. It looks like Barry, I see your hand up. If there's any other members of the public that would like to provide input on what you heard tonight, I know there were some folks, as Panama mentioned earlier, in our small group that had some thoughts they wanted to share. This is your opportunity. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to unmute folks. And as before, we have a 2-minute timer. If you all could stay within that time, we greatly appreciate it. And Eric, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. It looks like we have a responsive group here. Starting first with Barry Busowitz, followed by Patrick Carter. I've asked you to unmute. Barry, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. I heard great thoughts tonight, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm really glad I got to listen in. And the thing that I want, besides that, to say that is I want to know, how can I get the list of all the public forums so I can see which, if any, I can schedule in and go to in person, whether it's virtually or in person. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Barry.
Barry, I'll just go ahead and mention it. We'll plug it again at the end, but it is on the project website. But I'm sure if you can't find it there, we'll definitely grab your email address and make sure we get that information to you.
Yes, planpetaluma.org.
There you go. Thank you, Christina. Okay, back to you, Eric.
Thanks. And up next is Patrick Carter, followed by Beverly Alexander. Patrick, I've asked you to unmute.
Hello, I'm actually, while I'm a city staff member, I'm here participating as a member of the public right now. Couple of thoughts, and I really appreciated the discussion in the group that I was in. Some really great insights in that. Panama may be right; it may have been the best group. But my thoughts were, I didn't hear much about water supply in all this, and in a drought, it's crucial, but it's essential in non-drought times as well. And just thought about how we could encourage groundwater recharge instead of just thinking about channeling all that runoff into streams and stormwater to be dealt with as some other way, to really consider that rainfall as a resource in ways. I think about the recycled water use and water use in general in the city, and I just think it's not the city's fault, but just how our civilization has started practices like flushing toilets with drinking water. Things like that are just kind of strange that we don't have another alternative. So the promotion of recycled water and other ways to build that infrastructure is something I'm not sure if that happens through the general plan or if that's a different policy that happens elsewhere, but something I think is on my mind at least. And then finally, agriculture. I know that I saw it mentioned in some places, but as I think about how climate change is going to change agriculture, we may want to be thinking forwardly about how agriculture is going to change potentially in indoor agriculture or vertical farming. So I don't know if there's something that we can think about on that. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Up next is Beverly Alexander, followed by M. Sullivan. Beverly, I've asked you to unmute. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. When you look at the map that I saw, it looked like most of the natural areas have been relegated to the edges of town. But we are very lucky in that we have an undeveloped area right in the center of town on the river, and we need to protect that area. It is a river corridor, a lush riparian habitat, and an important carbon sink. It has always been subject to flooding, and building there will only push flooding elsewhere, and it will destroy this important carbon sink and wilderness sink. So we need to define and protect that Petaluma River corridor and restore those wildlands. The river corridor is the green heart of Petaluma. It gives us respite from the rush of modern life. And we treasure our original home, and we need to make it more accessible to people because it's walkable from almost everywhere. So we would be able to find delight in the river and and a healthy riparian habitat that gave birth to Petaluma. And then on the subject of water, we need to figure out where the water is going to come from before we start building more. And I really like the idea of using various strategies, making composting toilets legal, helping people to save water from their roofs, and also to route water from their showers to the landscape. So we need to be like good gardeners of our natural resources and take care of our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. And up next is M. Sullivan, followed by Veronica O. M. Sullivan, I've asked you to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you to the members of the GPAC. I would urge you to take a look at what the Urban Land Institute put together for the city of Petaluma. They showed that we could meet our regional housing allocation numbers without having to encroach on our river ecosystems, and especially the segment of the river known as the Corona Reach between Payran and Corona Road, which is the largest and most environmentally sensitive section of the river. Regards our Petaluma River Access and Enhancement Plan, our major city policy document, the enhancement portion refers to expanding the existing ecosystems there. In other words, expanding the riparian woodlands and planting out more native oak trees and preserving the seasonal wetlands and grasslands. We're a town on a river watershed with a major tributary of San Pablo Bay running through our center. And as such, we have major wildlife habitat within our urban growth boundary. And Northern California is a global biodiversity hotspot. So I would recommend that we stop focusing on human-centric terms like floodplain and floodway, and instead embrace the concept of habitat, including the critically important land parcels adjacent to our river. These seasonal wetlands and grasslands are amongst the most productive ecosystems on Earth, and they're vital for carbon sequestration. What we don't want and don't need are subdivisions, more big box stores, and the Rainier Connector with its monstrous concrete footers cemented on these priceless wetlands and grasslands. Grassland restoration and conservation is more important than ever. Drought and wildfire have impacted California forests' ability to store carbon, and grasslands, where they store most of their carbon underground, are more reliable at storing carbon than forests and are critically important in our response to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And up next is Veronica O. Veronica, I've asked you to unmute yourself.
Good evening, GPAC members and staff and community and Ramey and Associates. I just wanted to make a few comments on the numbers that were covered tonight. And I thought maybe to just simplify, the mayor of Paris has committed to the 15-minute city. It incorporates a lot of our ideas, and maybe that's a way we can start framing it. The 15-minute city. Also, in terms of us being a river town, I think that should be number one on our list as something we identify with. It defines our culture, it defines our history, it defines the ecological systems that support us. And nature should become a very important part of our dialogue and living systems and supporting them. So I think that should go up as number one. Also, bikeable and walkable city is another main kind of theme that we need to embrace and start really talking about how we're going to connect bike paths, how we're going to connect green infrastructure with natural systems so that our city actually flows and people have spaces and places to go to. If we talk about equity, we need to support equity. And I also think about talking about concepts such as food shed, watershed, culture shed, reuse, and ecological mapping. Nobody's talking about it. We've got to figure out what we have, what our ecological networks and corridors are, what our natural assets are, and our biodiversity assessments. That all relates to how we're going to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. And that was the last hand that I saw raised for public comment. With that, I'll pass it back to Dave.
Great, thank you, Eric, and thank you again, members of the public. It's also always great to see you here. I really appreciate your time and sticking with us through this long meeting. Your input is very valuable, and again, we really hope to hear from you more at the citywide engagement activities that are coming up. So we are just about done here, but as we typically do, want to provide space for members of the GPAC if you had any final thoughts before we wrap up and send you on your way. I'm not seeing any. I think everyone is exhausted from sharing all their great thoughts already. We are right at 9 o'clock, which is great. And just again, as a reminder, all of this great information is on the project website. Christina, if you want to plug that again one more time.
planpetaluma.org.
I'd just like to hear you say it, Christina. Thank you. Please do visit that and stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.